This is Surfing Through Cinema. I'm your host, Hawaii Harry. Today I'll be discussing the next film for Star Wars Week. From director Rian Johnson of Breaking Bad acclaim, this is the film that has divided the Star Wars fan base, potentially indefinitely. This episode is all about Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Okay, so some technical details about The Last Jedi. So, Carrie Fisher actually helped write out the script in this movie. She was known in the past for helping beef up the scripts on movies she was in. You know, she was a well-known writer. And Rian Johnson said that she actually helped out a lot with her scenes. A lot of her dialogue was ad-libbed and added in because of Carrie Fisher. Another technical detail. This is the longest Star Wars movie at 2 hours and 32 minutes. And the only one that comes even close is Revenge of the Sith, which is at 2 hours and 26. And then Rise of Skywalker is up there as well. So this is the longest one, and many fans felt that was a little too long, but I'll get into that more as I review my points of it. Yeah, so let's get into the plot for The Last Jedi. Alright, so the First Order has surrounded the Resistance. The Resistance is still recovering from the last battle from The Force Awakens. Poe Dameron and his crew of bombers, they go around starting to blow up a Star Destroyer. And but that was at a major cost for the fleet. Many of the bombers died. They jump into hyperspace after this happens, but the First Order is able to track them down and follows them almost immediately. And that's when they realize the First Order has a tracker that could track ships through hyperspace. The Resistance fleet, they're out of gasoline, if you will, in their ships, so they're kind of sitting ducks in water. So the First Order attacks the command ship Leia is on, and every Resistance leader except for her, she's able to save herself through the Force, dies. And that comes at a huge loss for the Resistance. And so Vice Admiral Hondo, played by Laura Dern, she takes over as commander of the whole Resistance army. So then it cuts to Ahch-To, which is where Rey was at the end of Force Awakens. She's met with Luke, who initially refuses to train her, but he eventually gives in once he realizes how much power she has. And while she's being trained, she and Kylo Ren are somehow being connected telepathically. They're able to talk into each other's minds and even see each other. And Rey learns that Luke actually tried to kill Kylo Ren in his sleep. And so Luke discusses that he felt and sensed very much anger and darkness in Kylo. So he felt to avoid the tragedy that happened. So to avoid tragedy, he decides to kill him. But Kylo, of course, wakes up and everything Luke foresaw transpires anyways. And then another side story going on. So Finn and his new friend Rose, who he met while he was trying to go into an escape pod, they need to find a code breaker to disable the First Order's tracking device that I had discussed earlier. They go to this planet that has a casino on it, and they do find a code breaker played by Benicio del Toro. They make it back to the First Order command ship, but they're in prison. They're found out. And so his name's DJ, played by Benicio del Toro. He kind of betrays them and decides to sell in information about the Resistance. And what they discover is that the Resistance is trying to save all of their members from their ships, so they're escaping in little pods, which Poe is very displeased with, and because he hates Vice Admiral Hondo because of this. And he starts a mutiny on board the ship, but then he's eventually knocked out by Princess Leia. She comes back from her experience on the command ship. And so the First Order is starting to shoot off all of these escape pods. And while this is happening, Rey flies to Kylo Ren on the command ship on the First Order command ship. They go into the throne room to see Snoke, who reveals to them he's actually been the one connecting them through their minds, and that it was him who said that there was actually good in Kylo, because that was the reason why she went. She went to go save Kylo from the dark side. But in the process, Kylo realizes, how evil Snoke really is, and he turns the lightsaber that it's right next to him and kills Snoke, and he and Rey decide to team up and fight and kill the rest of the guards in that area. And at the end of it, Kylo says, let's forget the Resistance and the First Order. Let them destroy each other. Let's start our own thing. And Rey just can't do it. She has too many friends, too many things she likes with the Resistance, so they kind of end on bad terms. While the First Order is attacking the Resistance escape pods, Vice Admiral Holdo, she stayed on the ship and decides to go into hyperspace and cuts through the command ship. And so this helps the Resistance escape and make it to a rebel base on the planet Crate, which is a salt planet, but kind of looks like Hoth, honestly. And so the First Order follows them down with these giant AT-ATs to break through the rebel base to kill them off. And Poe and Finn and Rose and others, they start attacking the First Order's AT-ATs, as well as this cannon that they have that they're going to use to ram through the door and break it down. And Finn decides to fly towards it, to blow it up. But Rose comes in and crashes her ship into his, and preventing him from committing suicide, basically. Luke appears and he faces Kylo Ren. And as it turns out, though, Luke is just projecting himself as a Force ghost. Or not as a Force ghost, but Luke is projecting himself. So he's kind of a hologram, if you think about it. So the Resistance crew escapes on the Millennium Falcon, and Luke dies. He gives up the ghost, no pun intended, and becomes one with the Force, and there's two binary suns setting on his life, playing the same music from A New Hope, and the famous scene with him looking at the suns, determining what he needs to do next. Okay, so that's the plot to The Last Jedi. I'm going to go on a break real quick, but first, here's a message from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Here's how. It's totally free. There are tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your computer and even your cell phone. But that's not all. Anchor distributes your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You could even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is everything you need to make a complete podcast all in one small place. So go on and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Okay, so now that we're back from a break, I'm going to get into some critical views and my personal views on The Last Jedi. As many of you know, I use the scores from Rotten Tomatoes, and I've discussed in the past how it seems that the critics and the fans are kind of divided in regards to movies. Well, this is probably the most prime example of that. Like I stated earlier, fans absolutely hated this movie, or they absolutely loved it. It was so polarizing, so divided. And the Rotten Tomatoes score kind of reflects that. 90% from critics, 42% from the audience. That just shows that there's a major disconnect. Because many fans, they felt they were being insulted. They felt that a lot of the things they loved and enjoyed about Star Wars were kind of just thrown out the window, thrown to the wayside. And I'll get more into that in my personal views. But there's even a whole subreddit about this. They call it Saltier Than Crate. And this discusses a lot of the problems that are in The Last Jedi. Also from the audience, it has an IMDb score of 7 out of 10. So it's not a horrible scoring for a movie, but you see many channels that will spend hours and hours ripping apart this film. That's not what I want to do here today. I feel too many people already do that. Yes, I have problems with it, but I don't think it's the worst Star Wars movie, honestly. I really don't. So that'll lead into my personal views. So I honestly do not like the Finn and Rose subplot. I thought it was kind of lame. I thought it was kind of boring, and I don't understand Benicio del Toro's character at all. He has this weird lisp, and I just did not like it at all. When I was watching it this time around, I asked my wife, I said, if I turn this movie on right now, this is in the scene when they're in the casino, would you be able to tell me this is a Star Wars movie? And she said no. We both came to the conclusion, this looks like a James Bond scene. This looks like Casablanca. Like, this does not look like a Star Wars movie. And that's a little concerning because when you throw off the world building like that and try to bring in elements that don't feel Star Wars, it's very off-putting. Now, I'll give Rian Johnson credit. I think he gets too much hate for this. It's not a good movie. It's really not, but I think he gets too much hate for it. And so does the actress who played Rose. She didn't write her dialogue. You know, she didn't create this character. She was hired to be this character. So we can't put all the blame into her. You know, again, I commend him, Rian Johnson, for having a different vision than J.J. Abrams. I don't like, though, that some elements like Snoke, for example, and Rey's identity and all that, big themes we were so focused on in Force Awakens, were kind of just tossed out the window. And you're like, oh, well, that was kind of pointless. Or, it's so many plot holes. Like, what do you mean Rey and Poe didn't meet before? I could have swore they met in The Force Awakens. I even researched. There was a novelization of the book, and they meet each other in the book. So there's a lot of continuity errors and plot holes, but I commend him for trying to have a different idea. I don't think it was executed correctly, and I think the biggest reason why this trilogy in general just suffers, they didn't plan it all out. They should have laid out the end from the beginning. That's how the prequel trilogy was done. That's how the original trilogy was done. That's how Harry Potter was done. Great story arcs, you need to have a starting point and a finishing point. The middle is how you get to that point. These movies, and they've said in articles and interviews, they didn't have these all planned out. I think if they did have it planned out, it probably would have been a good movie. On its own, it's got great special effects. But again, it's got elements that I think kind of ruin it. It's got Marvel humor, which is fine for Marvel. But the scene I'm thinking of in particular is General Hux. He's calling Poe Dameron, right? And then Poe's like, hello, is anyone there? Like, it felt like a stand-up comedy routine. General Hux is a cartoon character, like I've heard people say. He's not a real scary villain. And another thing I learned from the subreddit, they said, you're telling me a guy with tantrum problems, Kylo Ren, this cartoon character of a villain, General Hux, and then Snoke, who dies almost instantly, you're telling me all of these guys almost destroyed the Resistance? And they built a Starkiller base without anyone knowing? There's so many problems that just don't make sense. Another point, Vice Admiral Holdo, played by Laura Dern. I like her in Jurassic Park. I think she's a great actress. I just don't like her as this character. It was hard to like her, and when she sacrifices herself, that doesn't really redeem me liking her. That's just like, okay, we don't need to have nice characters all the time. You know, it's kind of interesting seeing a different take on the constant, let's go attack and build them, you know, destroy them. Like, no, let's think about it for a minute. Let's escape through escape pods. That's interesting, but I just didn't like this character. I didn't understand her motives at all. And, yeah. If you want to see a movie with Laura Dern and a science fiction movie, I recommend Jurassic Park. That's the better sci-fi movie she's in. And then the last point, despite all these problems I had with it, I actually did like the throne room battle. But again, why did they kill off Snoke so fast? I did read in an article that Rian Johnson wanted to avoid another Darth Vader Emperor archetype, which makes sense. We don't want to have to keep repeating ourselves. But if that's the case, then why did we have so much buildup with him in The Force Awakens? And I think all of this would have been solved had they planned these all out. I didn't have the luxury of seeing this movie in theaters. I saw it at home when I came home from my 2-year mission. We're not allowed to watch movies on our missions, not until we get home. So I didn't have the theatrical experience with it. I saw it on my parents' television, and my first thoughts of it were, yeah, this is not a good movie. And ever since then, every time I watch it, I still have that same thing. I'm like, is this thing still going? Like, why is it 2 hours and 32 minutes? I don't understand that. If they cut out that whole Rose and Finn subplot, or somehow combined it with Rey, I don't know. The more interesting one was Rey's. Why didn't they have more of that? I don't get it. And Luke Skywalker, one of my favorite characters, he's kind of boiled down to this weird hermit of a guy, which I could see what Rian Johnson was trying to do. He's trying to make him seem that try to make him seem like he's not the Luke Skywalker he used to be. But like Han Solo, we never get to see them be the character they used to be. They just say, oh, I used to be that, or that's not me anymore. But then we never see them get back to that. It's fine saying they're not that anymore. It's been 30 years. That makes sense. But we want to see them end up doing that. We want to see the familiarity with it. Luke was not familiar. I was disappointed with him. I think I was the most disappointed with that. Last point, I already talked about it a little bit. The comedy didn't make sense with it. I think they were trying to bank off of Guardians coming out that year, and they're probably trying to make it more funny than usual. It just didn't make sense with a lot of the more serious scenes. By and large, I gave this movie a 6 out of 10. It's not awful, but there's so many problems with it that just make it not enjoyable to watch. If you're a completist, it's worth watching once. That way you could get it out of the way and discover for yourself what other people are talking about with it. But you don't have to rewatch it. I don't know what else to say. I think it was a very big disappointment. I'm sad it turned out this way. I wish it was better. But this is what we get. Alright, so those are my thoughts and feelings on The Last Jedi. Next time, I'll be discussing the next film for Disney Week. One of the most beloved Disney classics, and all about Cruella de Vil and Dalmatians, this episode is all about 101 Dalmatians from 1961. Alright, well until next time, this has been Surfing Through Cinema with Hawaii Harry. Take care! Thank you for listening to Surfing Through Cinema. Make sure to check us out on Facebook at Surfing Through Cinema with Hawaii Harry and on Instagram with Surfing Through Cinema. We also have a website, www.anchor.fm/Surfing Through Cinema, where you can learn more details on upcoming episodes and on past episodes.